Buck Rogers in the 25th century wasn't born with Star Wars. He came from pulp magazines, radio waves, and matinee serials. But when the 1970s came calling, it was fight or fade into oblivion. A relic dragged back from the vaults, a disco makeover of lasers and glam, and a gamble that put pulp back in the spotlight. These are 20 weird facts about Buck Rogers in the 25th century, and hidden inside the polyester and the primetime glow, it was the past colliding with the future. The kitsch tried to bury him, but the legend refused to die. Number 1. Buck Rogers didn't start in Hollywood. He was born in 1928 in Philip Francis Nowlin's pulp novella Armageddon 24, 19 AD, where a World War I veteran wakes up in the 25th century to a world of jetpacks and ray guns. Within a year, he leapt into comic strips, and suddenly Buck was everywhere, in Sunday newspapers, on radio waves, and eventually on screen, where Buster Crabbe's 1939 serial cemented him as the first great space hero. For decades, Buck Rogers was America's future, inspiring generations of kids to dream of rocket belts and interstellar battles. By the 1970s, though, Buck was a relic. The culture had moved on to Planet of the Apes, Star Trek, and James Bond. Then Star Wars exploded in 1977 and rewrote the rules. Suddenly, every studio wanted its own space epic. Universal dug into its vault, and Glenn A. Larson, hot off Battlestar Galactica, revived Buck for the disco age. The pulp hero was reborn with glossy production, spandex, and swagger. No longer a dusty comic strip, but a pop revival designed to ride the space opera wave. Number 2. Buck Rogers was never supposed to be a movie. NBC had ordered a 2-hour pilot to test the waters for a new weekly series, hoping to cash in quietly on the Star Wars boom. But Universal saw dollar signs. They took the finished pilot, trimmed it for theaters, and released it in March 1979, betting that nostalgia and space fever could turn a TV gamble into box office gold. To everyone's surprise, the gamble paid off. On a modest $3.5 million budget, the film grossed over $21 million domestically, numbers usually reserved for bigger, glossier productions. Audiences flocked to see Gil Gerard's wisecracking Buck, Aaron Gray's glamorous Colonel Wilma Dearing, and Twiki's catchphrase, "Bitty bitty bitty." Theatrical success forced NBC's hand. The pilot now had to launch a full series. Overnight, a one-off experiment became a franchise revival, and Buck Rogers found himself leapfrogging from pulp history into the prime-time spotlight of late 70s pop culture. Number 3. When Buck Rogers is launched into the future aboard Ranger 3, the name feels like pulp invention. But in 1962, NASA actually launched a probe called Ranger 3 on a mission to the moon. Instead of glory, the spacecraft missed its target, drifting into deep space, a failure that left it wandering forever. The coincidence is eerie. Was the show's Ranger 3 named after the doomed probe, or just a happy accident? No one involved has ever confirmed the connection, but the parallel makes Buck's frozen voyage stranger and more believable. His shuttle wasn't just fantasy, it echoed real history, a reminder that even in reality, space travel sometimes drifts off course into the unknown. Number 4. When Universal set out to cast Buck Rogers, they imagined a marquee name, someone with movie star shine to ride the Star Wars wave. Gil Gerard wasn't that. At the time, he was a working actor best known for commercials and modest TV roles, hardly the type to headline a sci-fi revival, but Gerard had presence. At his screen test, he walked in with a natural ease, tall, broad-shouldered, charming, in a way that felt more blue-collar pilot than polished space hero. That difference was exactly what set him apart. Instead of a stiff pulp throwback, Buck became a relatable everyman, a modern guy waking up in a bizarre future, meeting it with humor, skepticism, and flashes of vulnerability. Gerard later admitted he didn't always love the scripts, clashing with producers over Buck's jokey tone, but his casting was the linchpin. Without him, the 25th century might have felt hollow. With him, the show had a beating heart, a Buck who was flawed, human, and just grounded enough to make disco-era space opera feel believable. Number 5. When Aaron Gray first signed on to play Colonel Wilma Dearing, she thought she'd landed a career-defining role, a rare mix of brains, authority, and glamour. But Hollywood still had its mandates, even in the 25th century. After the pilot was filmed, producers briefly flirted with replacing her, casting actress Juanin Clay instead. Then, realizing Gray had the edge they needed, they scrambled to bring her back. The price? She had to change her look. Gray was ordered to go blonde, a decision rooted in the old studio belief that lighter hair made women seem more accessible to audiences. Gray complied, but the resentment simmered. By season 2, she rebelled and returned to her natural brunette, insisting Wilma didn't need peroxide to command command authority. That small act of defiance was more than cosmetic. It mirrored the character herself, a woman navigating a male-dominated world, fighting for respect on her own terms. Fans adored her either way, and Gray later said that Wilma became a role model not just for viewers, but for herself. Proof that strength doesn't need studio polish to shine. Number 6. Behind the scenes, Buck Rogers was a battleground, not against aliens, but between Gil Gerard and the writing staff. Gerard hated how wisecracking and lightweight Buck often felt, complaining that the show leaned too heavily into camp instead of treating him like a serious hero. He frequently challenged dialogue, softened jokes, and even rewrote lines on the fly. Writers bristled, calling him difficult, but Gerard defended his clashes as protecting the character's dignity. He wanted Buck to inspire, not just quip. The friction never stopped, and while some saw it as ego, others later admitted he was right. The show never quite decided if it was parody or adventure, and Gerard's push for weight gave Buck more humanity than the script sometimes allowed. Number 7. When Brigadier Gordon strode into the episode planet of the Slave Girls, longtime fans gasped. He was played by Buster Crabbe, the original Buck Rogers from the 1939 serial, and also Flash Gordon before that. Crabbe's presence wasn't just stunt casting, it was meta time travel. In one unforgettable exchange, he told Gil Gerard,
"I've been doing that sort of thing since before you were born, Captain."
For older viewers, it was a wink to their childhood. For younger fans, it was a living bridge between eras of science fiction, from Depression-era movie serials to disco-era television. Crabbe's cameo gave the new Buck Rogers instant legitimacy, reminding everyone that the franchise had survived generations, and the torch had truly been passed. Number 8. If Buck Rogers was the everyman hero, then Princess Ardala was his glittering opposite, a vision of danger wrapped in seduction. Played by Pamela Hensley, Ardala wasn't content to rule her world. She wanted Earth, and she wanted Buck chained at her side as proof of her conquest. Her costumes, often little more than glittering armor and plunging silks, slipped past TV censors who somehow ignored just how provocative they were. But Ardala wasn't just eye candy. She was cunning, ruthless, and oddly sympathetic. A woman fighting to claim power in a universe that constantly underestimated her. Paired with her scheming partner Kane, first Henry Silva in the pilot, later Michael and Sarah, she became the true nemesis of Buck's 25th century adventures. Fans couldn't take their eyes off her, and even critics who rolled their eyes at the show admitted Hensley had presence. Ardala turned camp into command, striding through the disco sci-fi chaos with the confidence of a queen who knew that desire and danger were often the same thing. Number 9. The Buck Rogers movie that hit theaters in 1979 was cheekier and rougher than anything NBC wanted on primetime. Buck cursed, called Wilma ballsy, and killed Tigerman in cold blood. The opening credits were drenched in sultry images of women, closer to a James Bond film than Saturday night family viewing. But when the pilot was recut for TV, all of that changed. NBC stripped out the swearing, kept Tigerman alive, and swapped the provocative opening for something safe. The result was a tamer version of Buck, one that fit the network's time slot but lost some of the edge that had made the theatrical cut a hit. Fans who saw both noticed the difference. The movie winked, the series played it straight. Number 10. Every hero needs a sidekick, and in the 25th century that role belonged to Twiki, a squat, wisecracking robot with a voice fans never forgot. But Twiki was actually two performers in one. Inside the shiny suit was Felix Silla, a veteran stuntman best known as Cousin It from the Addams Family. The body language, the shuffle, the comic timing, that was all Silla sweating inside heavy metal and fiberglass. The voice, though, came from none other than Mel Blanc, the legendary Looney Tunes actor who had once mocked space opera as Duck Dodgers in the 24.5 century. Blanc gave Twiki his trademark bitty 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 stutter, turning what could have been just another robot into a pop culture oddity. For 5 episodes, though, Blanc was suddenly gone, replaced by Bob Elia, a Universal staffer. No reason was given, and viewers were left baffled when Twiki suddenly sounded like a different character. Blanc returned soon after, restoring the robot's personality, but the brief switch remains one of the strangest quirks in Buck Rogers' production history, a reminder that even in the 25th century, stars could still be temperamental. Number 11. If you blinked, you might have missed him. Joseph Wiseman, the same actor who made history as James Bond's very first big-screen villain, Dr. No, was originally cast as Emperor Draco, the puppet master of Buck's enemies. But when the film was recut for TV, most of his scenes vanished. What should have been a commanding villain was reduced to a flickering hologram cameo. To make things even stranger, early merchandise was based on rough cuts and concept art, so Draco's image appeared in toy lines despite his tiny role. Fans expecting a larger-than-life villain got almost nothing, and Wiseman's presence faded into obscurity. Years later, he returned in an episode called Vegas in Space, but by then, the missing Emperor had already become one of the series' strangest footnotes. Number 12. When Buck Rogers in the 25th Century launched, it wasn't built entirely from scratch. It was stitched together from the bones of another fallen space opera. Just months before, Battlestar Galactica had been canceled, leaving warehouses full of unused props, costumes, and models. Universal wasn't about to let them rot. The Landrum, Galactica's armored ground vehicle, simply rolled straight into Buck Rogers, repainted and repurposed as if it had always belonged in the 25th century. Ranger 3, Buck's ill-fated shuttle, was actually recycled from Galactica's two-part episode Greetings from Earth, stripped, polished, and reimagined. Even the Terran starfighters carried the fingerprints of Ralph McQuarrie, whose early Galactica sketches were dusted off and transformed into Buck's sleek starfighters. To sharp-eyed fans, it was a ghostly crossover, Galactica's DNA haunting every hangar and battle scene. To Universal, it was efficiency, saving millions by letting one canceled show quietly fuel another. For Buck, it meant the future was literally built out of the past. Number 13. The 25th century wasn't all futuristic sets and model work. Much of Buck's world was borrowed straight from Earth's own architecture. Universal didn't have the budget to build sprawling cities of tomorrow, so the crew turned to clever location scouting. The Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles, a futuristic glass and steel tower, became a recurring backdrop, its reflective surfaces doubling as alien skylines. Shots of Apollo rocket launches were lifted directly from NASA footage, grounding Buck's journey in real space history. Even Expo 67's futuristic pavilions in Montreal, relics of an optimistic past, were recycled as the bones of humanity's gleaming tomorrow. To audiences at home, the mix of concrete, steel, and stock footage felt seamless, a believable vision of the future. But to those who recognized the landmarks, it was a surreal trick. The future was built from places you could visit on vacation. In its own way, the series suggested the 25th century wasn't light years away. It was hiding in plain sight. Number 14. By the time Buck Rogers returned for its second season, the show had changed beyond recognition. Season 1 had been cheeky disco-flavored space opera, full of camp villains and wisecracks, but Gil Gerard had pushed for something weightier. The producers agreed, reshaping the series into a voyage of the week saga aboard the starship Searcher, echoing Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica in tone. Instead of battling Ardala or saving Earth, Buck, Wilma, and Twiki roamed the galaxy searching for lost colonies of humanity. Episodes tackled heady themes, ecology, prejudice, even religion, and Gerard finally got the serious Buck he had wanted. But the transformation came at a cost. The sparkle was gone, the humor muted, and ratings plummeted. Gerard clashed constantly with producers, stripping off his shirt in action scenes while rejecting the jokes that had made Buck fun. After just 13 episodes, NBC pulled the plug with no finale. The series simply stopped, leaving fans adrift. What began as a flashy revival ended in quiet collapse. A ship searching for humanity, but losing its own identity along the way. Number 15. For a show remembered as uneven, the guest stars were unforgettable. Jerry Orbach, yes, Law and Order's future Lenny Briscoe, swaggered in as a smuggler. A young Jamie Lee Curtis piloted a rogue ship, still glowing from her Halloween fame. Even child star Gary Coleman appeared as a pint-sized genius, delivering technobabble with deadpan charm. Each week felt like a roll of the dice. Would the episode lean into high adventure, campy flirtation, or moral sermonizing? Fans may debate the quality, but the roster of guest stars turned the series into a time capsule of late 70s and early 80s television, where household names and future legends wandered briefly into the 25th century. Number 16. When Buck Rogers in the 25th century debuted on Britain's ITV in 1980, it didn't just air quietly. It crashed headlong into a cultural battlefield. Saturday nights in the UK had long belonged to the BBC's Doctor Who, with Tom Baker's scarf and eccentric grin dominating living rooms. But suddenly, ITV had something flashier. Gil Gerard's smirking Buck, Erin Gray in her sleek uniform, and disco-fueled dogfights backed by American budgets. Episodes like Planet of the Slave Girls drew millions, and for a brief window, Buck Rogers siphoned away a significant portion of the BBC's audience. The timing was brutal. Baker was nearing the end of his legendary run, and Doctor Who's aging sets and slower pacing looked shabby against Buck's glossy production. Ratings dipped enough that the BBC blinked, shifting Doctor Who away from its Saturday night slot. Did Buck single-handedly dethrone the Time Lord? Probably not, but the competition hurt. For one strange season, an American pulp revival gave Britain's most enduring sci-fi icon a real scare, proving that even in the 25th century, TV wars were very much fought in the present. Number 17. When Buck planted a bomb at Tigerman in the theatrical cut, it looked like the end for Ardala's hulking enforcer. But when NBC retooled the film into a series, continuity was tossed aside. Tigerman reappeared alive and loyal, as if nothing had happened. Why? Because audiences loved him. His silent menace and sheer presence gave Ardala's court a mythic weight that lesser villains couldn't match. Producers gambled that viewers would forgive the inconsistency if it meant keeping a fan favorite on screen. In the strange logic of TV, death wasn't permanent. Ratings were. Tigerman's survival showed that in Buck's universe, narrative coherence bowed to spectacle and loyalty to fan demand. Number 18. While kids thrilled to laser dogfights and adults chuckled at the camp, critics were far less forgiving. Some reviews slammed it as cheap Star Wars imitation. Others put episodes like Space Rockers on lists of the worst sci-fi hours ever broadcast. Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray fought to bring dignity to their roles, but the show's uneven tone, swinging between moral sermon and disco comedy, made it easy fodder for ridicule. Decades later, however, that very inconsistency became part of its cult charm. What critics dismissed as shallow, fans remembered as bizarre, quotable fun. For them, bad wasn't the insult, it was the invitation. Number 19. For a brief, dazzling moment, Buck Rogers in the 25th century looked like it could rival Star Wars, at least on the toy shelves. Mego Corporation, already famous for its action figures, jumped on the license and flooded stores with Buck, Wilma, Ardala, and Twiki dolls. Starfighters and Draconian Marauders came in plastic model kits. Kids carried lunchboxes plastered with Gil Gerard's grin, and even puzzles and board games bore the logo. The marketing push was enormous, treating Buck not as a TV gamble, but as the next great space opera brand. But there was a catch. Unlike Star Wars, which had a global film phenomenon behind it, Buck Rogers was tied to a TV series that struggled with tone and ratings. Toys sold briskly in 1979 and 1980, riding the wave of disco-colored space mania, but interest faded almost as soon as Season 2 collapsed. Today, those toys fetch high prices among collectors. Relics of a moment when Universal and Mego believed Buck could conquer toy aisles the way Luke Skywalker had. For kids of that era, though, it didn't matter. Buck Rogers was their hero, even if only for one Saturday night at a time. Number 20. Even after the show faded from NBC, Buck Rogers didn't disappear. He respawned in arcades. In 1982, Sega released Buck Rogers, Planet of Zoom, one of the earliest 3D-style rail shooters. Players zoomed through neon tunnels, dodging geometric obstacles and blasting squadrons of enemies. Strangely, Buck himself never appeared on screen. No hero, no Wilma, no Twiki, just the player's ship screaming through hyperspace. But it didn't matter. The name Buck Rogers on the cabinet was enough to draw kids who'd grown up with the show or simply wanted the next big space adventure. The game was a quarter-munching hit, swallowing allowances across America, Japan, and Europe. It later got home ports on the Atari 2600, Commodore 64, and ColecoVision, spreading Buck into living rooms just as the TV show was slipping into reruns. For a generation, Buck Rogers wasn't just a pulp hero or disco relic. He was the face on the arcade machine that stole their afternoons. In a way, Planet of Zoom kept him alive longer than the series itself, proving that even when Hollywood lets a hero go, video games can keep him running forever. Bonus fact: Buck Rogers wasn't just a relic dragged out for late 70s nostalgia. He was a blueprint. Without Buck's serialized pulp adventures, there would be no Flash Gordon, no Star Wars, no endless cycle of space operas that followed. For children in 1979, Buck wasn't a history lesson. He was Saturday night television, plastic starfighters on bedroom floors, and arcade cabinets glowing in the dark. His NBC series may have fizzled after 2 seasons, but the character never truly vanished. Every generation has found him again, in comics, in games, and now in whispers of new reboots. Heroes age, studios stumble, but Buck Rogers endures. The 25th century wasn't just his setting, it became his destiny. Buck Rogers in the 25th century wasn't the slick, flawless future fans expected. It was messy, campy, uneven, and unforgettable. It borrowed from pulp, raided Battlestar Galactica's grave, and surfed the disco wave of Star Wars. For some, it was a guilty pleasure. For others, it was the spark that lit a lifelong love of science fiction. 4 decades later, the laser beams and shiny jumpsuits may look dated, but the spirit remains timeless. A man out of time, thrown into tomorrow, fighting villains, wooing allies, and stumbling through the absurdity of the future. If Buck Rogers ever blasted his way into your imagination, drop a comment. Tell us what cult classic we should rocket into next, because that mix of pulp grit and space-age camp is why Buck Rogers didn't just survive the 25th century, he survived in us.